What's up, everyone? If you want to turn Rafa into a Grenadier, then just two skills you need to build around. I'm going to show you how in this video. Here's skill trees for you to copy down while I discuss this. This build combines Rafa's Ordnance talents with the Chuck AR. It makes everything around you blow up. It can even melt bosses with one specific grenade. I tested all this after yesterday's patch. Everything's still working great. It can do a ton of damage, but can be very dangerous, so stick around as I break it down. Alright, starting out, here are the two skills you need to build around: Booming Business and Demolitions. Booming Business allows, anytime we have critical hits, to be able to spawn a free grenade. It's a 50% chance with 5 points in, and it has a cooldown time of 4 seconds. Now, that cooldown time doesn't appear to apply to when our grenades get critical chances, which is why we're going to use grenades with critical chance on them, and I'll show you that in the gear section. Also, we're going to use the Peacebreaker cannons here with Instinto for critical damage, and that way we can do even more chances of having these free grenades being thrown out as we go. We're going to also use Werga in order to have more chances of having our action skill Peacebreaker cannons active the entire time. So that's how the base of the build works, is with Booming Business. Every time we critically hit, we have a chance to spawn a free grenade. Now I'm going to show you with the infantry fuse grenade with the ricochet augments. All you need is for those grenades to be thrown out, to explode, and then they track onto other things, explode, and when they critically hit, they spawn free grenades. And essentially what you end up with is what you see here, where there's constant crits. Now you can see it's a little dangerous because they're nades and splash damage, but we're going to talk about a different way you can mitigate that later. The next skill we're building around is Demolitions here. When we have our cannons out, and overdrive is active, we're gonna be able to spam our grenades. Now, when you hit a grenade during its cooldown, it's gonna cost you health, and then it's gonna cost you more and more health. The way this reads is that every time a grenade is used, it costs more health, which it does. But it also says until Rafa's grenade is fully cooldown. That is not true. It appears to be anytime Peacebreaker cannons, whenever overdrive ends, is when this skill actually stops taking more damage. So this is either poorly worded or worded incorrectly. Either way, you have to be careful when you're using this build because we have our cannons active almost 100% of the time. It's easy to just try to spam grenades, but you want to keep an eye on your cooldown. Make sure you have a grenade ready, and then when you're bossing, all you need to do is really throw out as many grenades as possible until you go down. Let all the stickies home in, which I'll show you on the Firepot grenade. Let all those home in, switch your weapon, and then explode the boss, and it'll nuke anything in the game. The rest of the skills we're using are going to boost our gun damage and boost our overall ordnance damage. So you can see here with Handshake Deal, we're boosting some gun damage. Down here in Artillery, we're boosting our cooldown rate on ordnance. Collaborative Ignition boost damage from skills and ordnance. Since we're using our Peacebreaker cannons, the skill damage helps. This also, to the last, increases gun damage and skill damage, so that's for your Chuck and your cannons. And then we have Synergia, where whenever we deal ordnance damage, which will be all the time, we're going to gain stacks up to 100% of gun damage boost. So that's going to boost our gun damage. With our specializations, that'll boost our ordnance damage. So these all play into each other. And then finally, we're going into the red tree. We're going to go with some more gun damage for the Chuck and for our ordnance. And then Yurga, that's just going to give us action skill duration whenever critically hit. Because our grenades are constantly critically hitting, our cannons are constantly critically hitting, we almost have 100% uptime on our Peacebreaker cannons. And then that combined with Instinto, the kill skill, gaining action skill duration, and cannons have critical hit chance. All of this plays into spawning more free grenades from Booming Business, keeping our cannons active the whole time, using the extra skill damage we have, the extra ordnance damage, being able to spam grenades, and then being able to use things like the Chuck AR in order to do extra gun damage and from these extra skills. For our weapons, I'm using the Chuck. I'm using the base model. The one on the left is what I'm using. It is the most damage per hit on any of them. You can also use the Javelin, which I have one of these on the right. You can see I really liked it. It was really good for hitting things that are flying or from a distance. So if you're having trouble with the Chuck, you're causing yourself to deal more damage, well, to yourself, then try something like the Chuck with the Javelin, Chuck with the Merv, things that you could throw from a distance and be able to do more damage that way, as opposed to the Chuck where you almost have to be right next to the person and just outside of splash damage range. For my rep kit, my shield, and my enhancement, you can see here I'm using the Kill Spring rep kit. I use this because of the Blood Siphon perk. For when it kills enemies, you get healing orbs. Since you're always going to be doing splash damage, there's a chance that you're going to hit yourself. So the kill, being able to regen some health without having to use the rep kit. And then I have the Go-Go gadget on use for Ordnance cooldown. I also have the Onion. I've been using this one again, trying to mitigate some of the damage that we can do to ourselves with splash damage. And then the Hydrator TDR class mod, I'm using this because I am building around using Ordnance and the Chuck being able to have 50% max loaded ammo and 50% chance to spawn an additional projectile. All of these are great just to help the Chuck do more damage, and it's very useful for when you do end up in fight for your life, you're able to get back up. For our class mod, we're using the Grenazerker. The reason I'm using this is, one, whenever Rafa throws a grenade or T-Year gun, he throws an additional one, so you'll see here there's 2 grenades going out, and I have 2 to 3 different projectiles from the Chuck weapon. I'm also, you want to find this one with the most of the red skill, which is Confetti. That deals, Ordnance deals bonus damage based on your gun's current element, which the Chuck is kinetic, so our Ordnance will deal bonus kinetic damage. Then if you wanted to find a little more balance between the red and blue, blue is a Rebo, which gives you Ordnance cooldown on kills, but I find the best damage is done with using Confetti. Lastly, I have 2 grenades that I use for this. On the left is the Bullseye Infantry Fuse. This one with the Ricochet augment is really awesome. The projectiles ricochet off of enemies and towards other enemies. And then you gotta have one that has critical hit chance. And the reason I say that is because that's what's giving a chance to spawn the additional grenades that you can see here. So the Ricochet augment is the grenades are going to go out, they'll explode, they'll bounce all over the place. You can see it's bouncing to all the different target enemies, and that's what you want out of this. And it's a little dangerous because the enemies, if they're too close to you when the Ordnance explodes, it can do splash damage to yourself, but it is the most effective of all the grenades that I've used. On the right here is the Vampiric Firepot, the Firepot grenade. This is the best for bossing. It spawns Torgue stickies. They act like Torgue stickies. All you need to do is when you get to a boss fight, throw this out, and then make sure you have your overdrive active. Throw this out as many times as you can. You'll end up downing yourself. Let all the Torgue stickies hit the boss, and then switch your weapon. It'll automatically delete the boss. That's all you need to do. The one caveat I'll have with this is that if you're in a boss fight with water, say in the open world like this Horror for Kairos event, or something like Core Observer, you need to make sure that you're throwing the grenade onto dry land, because if it hits the water, it'll explode and none of the stickies will home in on the boss. So make sure you hit dry land, then the stickies will be able to home into the right spot. And all you need to do is get it close. It takes care of flying objects. It takes care of moving bosses. They just have to stick to them, and then you can delete them like a normal Torque sticky. Another grenade you can use are these Waterfall grenades. You want to find these with exacting for the critical hit chance, but also with lingering payloads. And the reason these are really helpful is because they leave things on the ground, the lingering payloads, that you can actually run through and they won't affect you and hurt you like the fuse will. But I find the fuse to be most effective because of its homing capabilities. For our firmware, we're using 3 of Get Throwing and 2 of Gadget Ahoy. The Get Throwing is for the Ordnance damage, splash radius, and then we have a chance when we throw Chuck or a grenade to have an additional projectile, which is a blue homing missile. You'll see that come out when you throw the Chuck. The Gadget Ahoy gives us cooldown duration on our Ordnance and also additional Ordnance damage. And then for our specializations, we're going to go 3 down on Gadgeteer. This gives us Ordnance cooldown when we have our action skill, which will be 100% of the time. So Ordnance cooldown will be increased the entire time we have overdrive out and our Peacebreaker cannons out. Ordnance damage now benefits from increases to gun damage from this one, and then Ordnance gains a chance to critically hit. This again goes into our booming business over in the green tree, trying to get as much critically hits from our Ordnance and from our cannons in order to spawn the free grenades. So that's why we're going with that one. And then lastly, we're going into Riddle You This. This is increased gun damage. That gun damage goes into ordnance damage. It goes into the Chuck. All of this is just benefiting itself and synergizing when we throw out ordnance or when we get those critical hits. And that's it for this build. Everything you need to make Rafa an explosion machine. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I try to answer them all. And then subscribe for my next video on Tuesday as I work through all the changes that this latest patch gave us. See ya!